Hello, I'm Linnea Frank from SJSU Libraries, and I'm here to offer suggestions to your book club about books that you can read for your upcoming discussions. The Warrior's Apprentice by Lois McMaster Bujold. Have you ever made a commitment that you can't actually manage to do? At least not yet. One of those things that you can do if you complete some other task first. What if that task that you have to complete requires another task? And what if the tasks keep piling up? And what if they keep getting more complicated? And what if failure to meet that first commitment would not only be humiliating, but lethal? This is the situation Miles Borkoskian finds himself in. Miles is a physically deformed young man from a planet where the only profession that is respected is a professional soldier. Miles is a brilliant individual, but he's not physically able to be a soldier. Not really. In fact, Miles fails his entrance exam into the academy to be a soldier. Riding the wave of his own despair, Miles impulsively agrees to help a suicidal pilot by purchasing the last working ship of the only model that the pilot is able to fly. There's just one small problem. Miles can't actually afford to buy the ship. At least, not unless he manages to find a cargo. And the cargo he manages to find is supposed to be delivered to a war zone. The planet in the war zone is actually under a blockade, being maintained by mercenaries. The mercenaries plan to kill Miles until Miles claims to be the commander of his own mercenary fleet, one that's much larger, and of course entirely mythical. Now Miles just has to keep the mercenary fleet from guessing his bluff. Oh, and he has to deliver that cargo before he can go home, which doesn't exactly work with his mercenary commander persona. But Miles has more difficulties than running his increasingly complicated and impromptu con. If Miles fails to convince the mercenaries of his persona, they'll kill him. But if he is successful, and the mercenaries believe that he is in fact their mercenary commander, it will cause very, very bad problems at home. In fact, it might cost him his home, or his family's honor, or even his life. Can Miles make it all work? Find out in The Warrior's Apprentice by Lois McMaster Bujold. The Great Starvation Experiment, The Heroic Men Who Starved So That Millions Could Live by Todd Tucker. Hunger, starvation, famine. These have always been cause for concern, but never the subject of scientific inquiry. At least, not until World War II. When I first heard the title of this book, my attention was caught. I wondered, was this like a real experiment with consent forms and a review board and ethical oversight? And what would it be like to starve not because of circumstances beyond my control, but by choice, for science? And would you really call participants in such an experiment heroes? And how on earth would you get anyone to want to participate in an experiment like that anyway? In fact, the participants in this experiment were drawn from the pool of conscientious objectors in the United States. 7,354 men applied for this status, which is about 1/5 of 1% of all of the men who were eligible for the draft. 12,000 men agreed to national service, just not military service. These men were reviled and viewed as cowards. They worked in camps throughout the United States and mostly lived there for their own protection. They were generally unsatisfied with their work. It didn't really seem significant, or of benefit to humanity as a whole. And how could they prove they weren't cowards if all they did was build roads? In 1944, these men saw a brochure. The brochure read, "Will you starve so that they may live?" 36 men did. Read the incredible true story in The Great Starvation Experiment, The Heroic Men Who Starved So That Millions Could Live, by Todd Tucker. Island of Ghosts, by Gillian Bradshaw. My name is Apprentice, and I am dead. I used to be a scepter holder, a powerful man among my people. We followed our flocks in our wagons, and we raided the Romans across the Danube for sport. Then came the thundering defeat. The emperor decided to spare what remained of our people in exchange for 6 dragons, 6 companies of men, cavalrymen, who were also archers and had great armor for their horses. He had no such men of his own, and so he wanted ours. So I passed the scepter, and I died. And so did all of my men with me. Their wives became widows and their children were fatherless. Our people declared us so before we began our exile in service to Rome. I am dead, but I am still breathing. But that could change at any moment. The Romans consider us barbarians, and many feel that it was a mistake to let us live. And they plan to correct this lapse at any provocation, unless I can convince them otherwise. But as long as they see me as a barbarian, they won't listen to me. But if I Romanize, my men won't listen to me either, and I will be no better off than before. And this is not the least of my problems. We are being sent to a Roman outpost on an island. We originally feared it was an island of ghosts, a place where only the dead lived. Well, as much as they live. That's not the case, but there are dark undercurrents here. I am not convinced of our safety, even from the locals. After all, why would the Romans send 3 of the very expensive heavy cavalry and archers that they wanted so badly to a quiet and peaceful province where they would get no use from them? Island of Ghosts, by Gillian Bradshaw. Catch-22, by Joseph Heller. Have you ever had your day thrown off kilter by a practical joke? Imagine if it was your whole life. This is what happened to Caleb Major. Or at least, he'd thought his name was Caleb Major. He'd answered to it his whole life until he got to kindergarten. There he learned his father was a practical joker who had the best practical joke of all, a name. You see, his name wasn't Caleb. It was Major. That's right, his name was Major Major. His life was a series of practical jokes, including the point where he joined the army and became, of course, a major. Major's life became much more interesting once he joined the army, though. That's where he met his best and most unusual friends. There's Josarian, who's angry because thousands of people he's never even met are trying to kill him, and he can't manage to get out of the army, so they'll stop trying to kill him. There's Milo Mindbinder, who destroyed his own airfield because the Germans made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Cost plus 6%. And there's the dead man in Josarian's tent, who's a great listener. These and many more are the fabric of Major's life in the army, where he learns the best practical joke of all, the punchline of which is always, Catch-22. Catch-22 by Joseph Heller. To Die For by Linda Howard. Blair Hillary's life was pretty good. She didn't really have any complaints. Except for this one woman that she met at work. Nicole, call me Nikki Goodwin, was a thorn in my side. She joined Great Bods, the gym I own, about a year ago and immediately began driving me crazy, though it took me a couple of months to notice. Nicole had one of those breathy little voices that make strong men melt. It made me want to strangle her. Nicole laid on the false sweetness, too, when she talked. It's a wonder everyone around her wasn't bouncing off the walls on a sugar high. At least she didn't do that finger twisting in the hair thing. But that was because I don't do it. See, Nicole was a copycat, and I'm the cat she copied. Nicole actually copied everything about Blair. Her hair color and style, her clothes, her makeup. She even went and bought the same kind of car, a white convertible. But, fortunately for Blair, Nicole annoyed everyone, so Blair was able to inform her at the end of her membership that her membership was not eligible for renewal. This was not something Nicole was pleased to hear. That night after work, Nicole was waiting for Blair when she came out. The rain and fog made it impossible to tell if anyone was in the Mustang, but then I made out a figure standing on the far side of the car, and I saw blonde hair. I reached in my bag for my cell phone and turned it on. If she made one step toward me, I was calling 911. Then the figure on the far side of the Mustang wavered and moved, and a bigger, darker shadow separated itself from Nicole. A man. She'd brought someone to beat me up. I punched in the 9 in the first one. A loud crack of noise made me jump a foot high, and my first thought was that lightning had struck nearby. But there hadn't been a blinding flash, nor did the ground shake. Then I realized the noise was probably a gunshot, and I was probably the target. In fact, Nicole was not the shooter. She was the victim. And it seems that someone killed her because they thought she was Blair. But Blair has no idea who would want to kill her. To complicate matters, the lead detective on the case, Wyatt Bloodsworth, is someone Blair used to date. Actually, they dated 3 times 2 years ago. Then Wyatt walked away without a word. But he seems pretty interested in starting the relationship up again. He even hunted her down when she left town to lie low for a while and see if she could figure out who wanted to kill her. With copycats, an ex who won't leave her alone, not that she's really sure she wants to be left alone, and an unknown killer, will Blair get her good life back? Or will the killer strike again, and this time succeed? To Die For by Linda Howard.